Hello and welcome to A Bechdel Dysfunction, a podcast that dissects feminist films directed by men and discusses whether they are helpful or harmful. I'm Cara Strover.
And I'm Harry Anderson. We are two film school underachievers who are heaps good at talking about movies but not that flash at making them. We want to acknowledge that we are recording this on Wurundjeri land, and we would also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. We extend that to any other First Nations people who may be listening today.
This week we're talking about 9 to 5, the 1980 comedy starring Jane Fonda, Lily Tomlin, and the fabulous Dolly Parton. I'm a podcaster. Why am I talking to you? Piss off.
That a girl. Okay, 9 to 5 from 1980, directed by Australian Colin Higgins, written by Patricia Resnick and Colin Higgins as well, starring Jane Fonda, Lily Tomlin, and Dolly Parton. Set in the 1980s in a New York office skyscraper, three women employees of a sexist, egotistical, lying, hypocritical bigot find a way to turn the tables on him. Thank you, IMDb, for that lovely synopsis.
That's good.
Hello, Cara. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Anytime. Is that our new intro? Welcome back. Thanks for having me.
Always good to visit the pod.
Yeah, always good to have you on. It's great to get your perspective on all this stuff. 9 to 5. Why is this a feminist film?
Thanks for asking.
No worries. Please enlighten me.
Like you just said, it's three women up against what is the line? Sexist, egotistical, hypocrite, bigot, something like that.
Sexist, egotistical, lying, hypocritical bigot.
Yeah, so against that guy, but he's not the only one. Mm-hmm. And this movie, I think is a really great snapshot of like all the issues facing women in the workplace and all the things like inhibiting their access to the workplace, their access to just getting jobs, their access to progressing careers. So yeah, that's why it's feminist. Very second wave kind of women got to be respected at work. And that's the thing that we're still not fully 100% around. So there it is.
Very good. I was just nodding into the microphone like a genius.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I rambled like a genius.
I think it's very succinct. It's a very succinct ramble. I guess that's kind of the spooky thing about it all, isn't it? It's just like this movie is 43 years old and still spookily relevant.
Relatable.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, just some of the things they touch on, sexual harassment is huge in this movie. I really like Lily Tomlin's story of not being able to progress, being constantly stuck in this supervisory training role, obviously knows the company inside and out, but unable to move forward. And it's just spelled out to her in the movie. It's because she's a woman. But also more indirect things like if you need childcare, if you need flexible hours because you have a family, if you have no work experience because you've been, a housewife previously, how all those things impacted a generation of women going into work for the first time and continue to impact to this day.
Mm. Was this the first time you'd ever watched 9 to 5?
It wasn't. I watched it. It's another one I've watched in high school for high school media, like year 10 or 11 media or something. But
how did that go down?
I don't really remember. Like I felt like the first time watching it because I could only kind of remember stuff from the first 40 minutes or so. I didn't really remember the plot. Mm-hmm. Just that it was kind of stupid.
The plot is they're going to get him.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yep.
But I didn't have strong memories of it. So it was kind of nice to go back to it. And with at the time also, I wasn't really that into Dolly Parton and I've since gotten much more into her. So, mm-hmm. I mean, that's the real, I think, for better or for worse, it doesn't really matter, morally speaking or anything. But the real legacy of this movie is the song 9 to 5. It's amazing.
So. Yeah.
A real sort of workers' rights and also kind of women's rights anthem on its own. And once it kicks off, you're like, yeah, I don't care what the rest of the movie is like.
Yeah, the song slaps, obviously. It's just a great catchy pop song and, has incredible morality. The balance of entertainment and morality, the perfect combination of anything if you want to succeed. But this was the first time I'd ever watched it in full. I'd seen like the first half hour. I'd seen like up to the scene where they like start smoking weed, but not not up to the point where they have like their not hallucinations, I guess their fantasies.
Their little daydream.
Which was dead set bonkers.
Yeah.
But, I guess that's okay. Yeah, it's I mean, I completely agree with the sentiment of the film, and I think it's quite funny at points, but I think it's kind of weird and dated in terms of some of its style and pacing. But yeah, that's just a style thing. I think the message of it it's greater than the sum of its parts for me as a viewing spectacle.
Yeah, I agree. It's very once it gets into what I'll call the sort of wacky 80s hijinks, it does start to, my interest in it kind of starts to wane. And unfortunately, I think also it's a comedy, and comedy kind of ages really quickly. Our cultural tastes will generally become sort of more sophisticated. Like what we found funny in the 80s, we don't really find funny now. So I think that's kind of working against it. But that being said, I still had moments that I liked. I think the performances are really strong as well.
Yeah.
Like I would actually say particularly Lily Tomlin, I think gives the strongest. And she kind of manages, even with pretty weak material, to just be funny and to just give her character like enough like side eye and sass and enough personality to kind of carry it even when, the jokes aren't that good and, it's all a bit stupid.
Yeah.
She's still really enjoyable to watch. I think they're all enjoyable to watch, but particularly I would say she's probably doing the best. And she's the only, experienced comedy actress in it. Jane Fonda's doing this like straight woman thing, and Dolly Parton, obviously, first acting role.
Yeah, that's baffling to me. I had no idea until I'd started, doing a bit of research. I watched the film first and then did a bit of research. I had no idea that was her first ever acting role, which is, she's awesome. Like she's so charming and so charismatic and brings a lot. I guess that's come from her musical background, where I guess sort of all the stuff in between songs has been very rehearsed and very polished and very projected. So that it appears that acting has just come very naturally to her from that sort of background.
She kind of does well. She's been in a few movies. She tends to do well in any movie where she's basically playing herself, and that they can kind of work her persona, not like as a singer, but just like her, sort of buxom blonde hair bimbo, but with a heart of gold kind of persona, when they can work that into the movie. Anytime, and if you have a good director, like if you have a director who kind of knows how to get a good performance out of her, but she really does do great in this. And I think it's her best. I think it's her best acting. Like, I don't think anything she does after this, but it's also probably her best film. I don't think anything she does after this kind of does as well.
Yeah. I haven't seen Little Whorehouse in Texas.
The best Little Whorehouse in Texas.
But I have seen the Simpsons episode it inspired. So, swings and roundabouts. Yeah, the chemistry between all three of them is quite excellent. Like that's really the glue that's holding it all together in something that is like a fairly meandering plot at times. And that does have like I feel like a lot of the humor just has a lot of like TV sitcom about it.
Yeah.
Whereas like every problem that's presented to them, it's all like, what are they going to do? Oh, what's going on? How are they going to get out of this?
Yeah, I agree. And it feels very 80s to me, like very 70s, 80s kind of. I mean, like when you think about it, when they say, they find a way to take him down, that's not really what happens. It's just a series of kind of coincidences where Lily Tomlin accidentally puts rat poison in his coffee, but then he coincidentally hits his head without drinking it. But they think that Lily Tomlin has accidentally poisoned him.
Yeah.
And then he's fine. But then they think, because of a misunderstanding, that he's dead. So they have to steal his body from the hospital. And then they take, like, it's just
drags.
It's just ongoing like that. And you're kind of like, how do we get here? And what's happening? I mean, the point, what they're trying to get to is a situation in which he's out of the picture and they're able to sort of take over the workplace.
And improve it for the better.
Like infiltrate it, like, because Dolly Parton can sign his name and Lily Tomlin knows the business inside and out. So they can kind of, with him, stowed away in his house in a weird contraption so that he swings from the roof every time he tries to like cut the ropes or whatever. They can, institute changes, which he later takes credit for. I mean, actually, there are points where I was kind of like the plot was actually kind of sexist, but we can maybe.
Well, we're wiggling all over the place. Do you want to give like a breakdown of the plot?
Our intro is Judy, who's starting at the business,
played by Jane Fonda.
And then we kind of befriends Lily Tomlin and Dolly Parton out of a shared sense of injustice at an unfair firing and sort of unfair situations that are happening at the office. They all fantasize about ways that they might like to humiliate or kill their boss. This previously mentioned coincidence of Lily Tomlin poisoning his coffee, but him not drinking it and ending up in hospital for totally unrelated reasons happens. Then, so they steal a body from the hospital.
Thinking that it's their dead boss.
And then they realize it's not their dead boss, so they take it back. And then they go to work as normal on Monday and they see him and they think, oh, everything's fine. Then they talk about it in the bathroom and the boss's like little office toady overhears them. So then he tries to blackmail Dolly Parton into having sex with him so that he won't call the police on Lily Tomlin. And then they decide to kidnap him. And then they hold him hostage in his house for like 3 months while they're trying to get some proof that he embezzled the company so that he can't blackmail. They'll be in like a blackmail stalemate. And then in the end, his wife comes home early and lets him out, and he actually gets promoted and takes credit for all of their. So the big boss comes down and he's like, "Oh, I love all these changes you've brought in. Do you want to go to Brazil?" And he's like, "Brazil? I don't want to go to the jungle." And then that's the end of the movie.
Quite meandering and chaotic and aimless, and well, I mean, everything is set up and is paid off, but it's just at such extensive lengths.
Yeah.
And it's, you got to fight for a meal that doesn't taste that good.
If you were you could use a rewrite.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like you're trying to get to, what's you're trying to get to? You're trying to get to a situation where he's not in the office, but they're, pretending to be him and doing all these changes. I feel like there's a way shorter way to get there.
Yeah.
This probably literally like, I'm going to fuck off with my mistress for 6 weeks. Can you pretend to run the company?
Yeah, would have been much more streamlined.
And probably like kind of more to the point that they're getting at. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like it's, it's wacky 80s sitcom hijinks.
Yeah.
Which are unfortunately not that funny.
Yeah. Well, you said it. Maybe it could have used a rewrite. Shall we get into talking about the people who made this?
Yeah.
So, as mentioned off the top, directed by Australian Colin Higgins, who had an interesting career. Started out as a writer in terms of his cinematic career. Wrote probably most famously Harold and Maude, Oscar-winning film directed by Hal Ashby, and a host of others. But this is his second.
I think it might be his first.
Is it his first?
I think it might be his first feature.
Foul Play was his first.
Never heard of it.
So this is the second of 3 films that he directed. Primarily a writer. Interesting individual, born in New Caledonia, raised in Australia, Australian mother, but American father, moved over to the States when he was 16, 17, lived an interesting life.
Joined the military for a bit.
Yeah, sailed the world.
Yeah, and he was an out gay man as well. Mm-hmm. I really think that factors into what I think is the sort of, in the context of what we talk about, his success in not kind of imposing this kind of very, straight white male perspective because he's not straight. So they adds this dimension or removes a layer of privilege from like sort of other directors that we've talked about. Because this, famously, there's an identification, and I don't mean to generalize, and obviously I don't know this man. I could be making it up, but like we have a cultural kind of generalization of gay men sort of identifying with women and identifying with, you know, glamour and like, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Gay icons, you know. So there's an identification with like othered and marginalized identities. So I think his perspective is able to more easily align with what the women in the film are experiencing. So yeah, for me, there's not as many of the same issues. I also think that has to do with the fact that this is really Jane Fonda's baby, and he does seem to have been very willing to let her kind of be the lead creative force on it while he comes in and sort of does like the day-to-day director stuff. Yeah.
Should we talk a little bit about how Jane Fonda came across this film, or wanted to make it, really? I guess it's kind of a roundabout way. Have you got anything in your notes there about that?
Well, a bit of background about Jane Fonda, Hanoi Jane.
Dual Oscar winner.
Yes. A very famously lefty commie sort of political figure, and very controversial as well. Less controversial by the time this movie had come out, but in the 60s and 70s, hugely controversial. Hanoi Jane, she did some stuff in Vietnam, which was like kind of questionable, but very anti-war. And she was also interested, obviously, in the women's movement and labor movement. She always talks about this movie as a labor movie.
Yep.
In a lot of interviews, she doesn't talk about it so much as a women's movie. It's more about the labor for her. But she also, I think, just understands and acknowledges like the intrinsic link between the two.
Yeah.
So
something that we've discussed previously as well in various movies so far. But yeah, do go
on. So I think it was a friend of hers who was part of an organization of like advocacy for secretarial workers, not quite a union, but just
it's like a support group almost, would you say?
Oh, kind of. Yeah. Like it's kind of like a consciousness raising group. Not officially a union, but just asking for the basic respect of their work. What she has this line that I like where it's like, you can do the job without the boss, but you can't do the job without the secretary. Something like that. Or it doesn't matter if the boss doesn't show up, but it matters if the secretaries don't. And that was her real sort of push for it. But what I like about it as well, and like she's credited as a co-writer or like the story idea, and then Patricia Resnick wrote the script. And I really like that you've got these three different perspectives, like a married woman who relies on dual income, that's Dolly Parton, a widow with 4 kids, that's Lily Tomlin, supporting her whole family, and then Jane Fonda recently divorced. So you have this kind of big feminist thing of like divorce and getting out of bad marriages and whatever, but it also comes with the flip side of your husband who you've relied on financially your whole life or your whole adult life can leave you for another woman, and then what's the next step for you? Yeah, really Jane Fonda's baby.
Yeah. And yeah, like you said, Patricia Resnick wrote the first draft, and essentially, but yeah, it appears Colin Higgins punched it up for the shooting script and sort of just added his comedic elements. So as far as I can tell, and as far as the story goes, Resnick sort of threw down the initial structure, and then the comedic elements have come in from our good friend Higo, who's, as far as we can tell, a pretty comedic storyteller.
Yeah, I don't know that he's as successul. I'm really talking out of my ass right now.
Yeah, because we don't know too much of his filmography.
And I haven't really seen it, but Harold and Maude is one of those ones of like, I've known about it and it's always been in the back of my head. I should watch. It's every time it's mentioned, it's like, I should watch that next time. And then I forget about it.
Yeah. Have you not seen it before?
I've not seen it.
I've seen it. It's pretty fucking funny. Like it's been a long time. I probably haven't seen it in about 7 or 8 years, but I watched it in my final year of uni. It's just good setup, payoff, dark comedy, not dissimilar to a lot of the comedic elements, I'd say, in other early 70s stuff, like very similar to Annie Hall. I don't know if you've seen that, or Manhattan, like that same sort of like dry wit kind of humor.
Which is interesting because that's totally not what this is. This is hijinks.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's more, I guess it's tone and execution of funny things, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a funny one. It's a funny film in the sense that obviously it's loaded with a political voice behind it, but that voice is somewhat muted. Would you say that's a fair assessment of it all? Like it's kind of a lot of it is hidden behind the need for it to be a successful film that everyone can go and watch.
I don't know. Well, because I don't find it that funny, so I'm really honing in on all the political stuff. But from what
Humor is an opinion.
But it was really successful. Mm-hmm. Like it's considered one of the funniest American films of all time or something, which is, interesting. I think its legacy, it's probably more remembered fondly now than it's considered truly timelessly funny in my subjective view. That's something like trying to think.
Name one comedy from the 70s. I dare you.
I was going to say, actually, I think Blazing Saddles is still funny. There you go. That's from the 70s, isn't it?
Yeah. I've never seen it. Oh, yeah. Look, I've honestly, even just like spending time looking at all these guys today, it's such a blind spot for me, this era. Perhaps this little patch, like, I was just, scrolling through Jane Fonda's filmography and the 2 Oscars that she's won. I had no idea that she'd won 2 Oscars and I had no idea what the films were. And I was just looking up the films and I'm like, they sound fucking amazing. How come I've never heard of them?
Clute and is the other one Julia?
Coming Home, I think it's called.
Oh, yeah. It's Coming Home because Henry Fonda's in that as well. Oh, no, wait. I'm thinking of On Golden Pond. Maybe she won for that.
Yeah, Coming Home, 1979.
That's the one where it's like her husband's like a war vet or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's actually, it's not really relevant, but that was a big way of her kind of trying to come back.
I sensed as such.
Because it was after like her really controversial, but like, again, we were talking before amongst ourselves about what a savvy businesswoman Dolly Parton is, but Jane Fonda is as well. Mm-hmm. Like she managed to claw back after really, like, people hated her. Like this is the other thing, like the 80s, hugely conservative time, or that we were going into. Ronald Reagan's the president. He doesn't like that they smoke weed in this movie. Mm-hmm. Like he managed to come back, like started out as kind of like a sex pot in Barbarella and then becomes this hugely political, controversial left-wing figure and then manages to come back in this very sort of sympathetic, army vet movie. She's, I love Jane Fonda. I don't even care that she's a Nepo baby.
Yeah, it's worth pointing out. I guess what I was banging on about this film sort of perhaps hiding its more thematic elements behind sort of lukewarm comedy are pretty well encapsulated in this little quote that I have. Fonda stated that the film remains a Labour film, different kind of Grapes of Wrath or Salt of the Earth. We took a lot of stuff out that was filmed. I'm just super sensitive that anything smacks of a soapbox or lecturing the audience, which is from an article in the Canberra Times from 1981, February 6. So that's what I mean. It's just like I can understand by wanting to subvert your themes and sort of just like impregnate those within people disguised behind humor, but there's a good chance they'll never get through. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. I just think that it does it anyway. It kind of makes me wonder what they cut, because to me I don't like calling them soapboxy because I don't think they are soapboxy, but there's a lot of soapboxy moments. Like the moment where she tells off her ex-husband is pretty soapboxy. When they're all in the bar talking about how it's like this everywhere, like that's pretty soapboxy. When oh God, that woman gets fired for talking about it. So, like, I kind of don't. I remember I watched that interview as well, and I was like, or I read that quote, and I was like, what did you cut out then?
Yeah.
Like, I think it's pretty out there, but I love that.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the strongest stuff, because I don't think the comedy is very funny.
Mm-hmm.
I think all the stuff about workplace culture and all the stuff about, how hard it is being a woman at work is the best stuff, because it's also the most like true to life.
It rings true and has stood the test of time.
I really felt like the first like 40 minutes, I was like,
Yeah.
Like, I feel like you probably wouldn't get a boss quite like that anymore. And actually, I was thinking if you were going to remake
you'd be
it,
surprised.
yeah, but I feel like if you were going to remake it, I reckon you'd sort of go the more like overly friendly, overly like HR kind of, but still shit boss. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
A very like HR and like woke aware kind of person, but who's still, we're like very like, I don't want to get too into it. I don't want to get in trouble.
That's all right. I'll fucking edit it.
Sometimes where it's like
Jonah Hill?
No. I'm just thinking of like we've got all these policies for flexi work and we've got all these policies for, again, it's a discrimination. And don't worry, like we know all the problem. And then once you have all that in place, it's like, do you actually do anything about it? Do you actually approve anybody's request to, work different hours? Do you actually accommodate for people who have families? Do you actually
Yeah, bureaucratic filibustering, really.
Yeah, that kind of thing. So, but yeah, I think that's the strongest part of the movie is like the first 40. And I started a new job this year, so when Jane Fonda was crying in the Xerox room, I was like, I understand Jane.
Yeah, I love all the montages in this movie. There's like you say, in the first sort of like half an hour, in that sort of world building element, there's a lot of like, oh, Jane Fonda can't do her job. Look at her on the phone. She doesn't know anything. Look at the Xerox machine. Like, yeah. I guess that's some of the stuff that I found to be like fairly dated. But I guess we can just sort of, to round it all off, people making this movie have their hearts in the right place. And they're doing it for all the right reasons. So big old tick in that department, even if the comedy by our high standards is a bit shit.
I would say even if I find, and I want to like reiterate, I guess, even if I find the comedy dated and the plot itself quite weak, I do think that the movie is pretty successful because, and it's like two prongs. I have two prongs.
Prong away.
Prong one. Oh, my notes, it says prong A.
Oh, no.
Okay, but we talk about, it's really about the importance of financial independence. Like you can't rely on a man for anything and you can't rely on a man for money. And, this is something my mother raised me. She said, Cara, two things. Don't use wallpaper and be financially independent. And then when I was a teen, she really walked back on the wallpaper thing and it just rocked my whole world. But anyway, be financially independent. Very important because, and like you need access to work and employment when you're stuck relying on another person. And this is true, like this is not just true for heterosexual relationships, just historically, but leads to financial abuse, can force people to stay in abusive relationships. Like the power imbalance is too strong. And then also you have situations like Jane Fonda's in this movie where your partner leaves you and then where are you left with? And your best case scenario is like Jane Fonda's where she manages to get a relatively good job despite no experience. And also it's pretty kind of like that in itself, pretty kind of obvious to me in the movie. That's because she looks like Jane Fonda and they want like someone who looks like Jane Fonda in the office. And what does it matter if she's dumb and she's never worked before? She's another secretary that someone can fuck. Like, there's that. That's your kind of best case scenario. And then your worst case scenario is homelessness, which is on the rise in older women. And it's terrible. So that's prong one, financial independence. But prong two is, which I think is really smart, is that because it's a labor movie, it also addresses that working conditions on a whole need improvement. And I think that's really relevant like in our current space, because there's this big sort of I won't call it big, but there is like an online movement, particularly sort of on the TikTok about
and bloody kids.
But it's about women who are sort of
go from
women who are alienated under capitalism, who hate their jobs, they work too much, they have no job satisfaction, they're not in an industry they care about. For whatever reason, they don't like work. And this has kind of led to this trad wife trend of, I'd rather just be a housewife. And like, first of all, housework is work. And second of all, if you're in that kind of relationship, it just leads to all the problems I just discussed in the other one. So I think what's the real success of this movie is it talks about, like, not only is it important for women to have access at work, it's important that work isn't this totally horrific experience that people don't want to do. It's important to, like, improve those conditions. It makes it better for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And that just, improves women's access to money and independence. And while we don't have the Marxist revolution, that's what we have to do. So, so if you're get a job.
Yeah. Yes. Well, there's a nice balance between Hanoi Jane and Capo Dog there. So thank you very much. Yeah. Again, can't speak for that experience personally, but yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you all the way.
That was my centerpiece bit.
Yeah.
She didn't pick up on that.
Yeah. Big time.
I think there is some nice, and like, it's not particularly strong or exciting in this area, but like, considering the era in which it was made, I think there's some nice little gestures to other forms of marginalization in the workplace. Particularly at the start when Judy gets hired and there's a black man who's in an even lower position in the mailroom who's upset about the fact that he can't progress higher because they keep, hiring pretty white women over him. And there's also, I noticed, like, in there, so when the boss comes back to the office and there's this sort of idyllic office space that they've created with their flex time and their job sharing and their daycare center, there's a really prominent extra of a man in a wheelchair. Mm-hmm. And I was like, see, and it's just this kind of gesture towards, like, we can do things. It's not that marginalized people can't do it. It's that we make it hostile to them, and we can make a workplace more accessible, and it makes it better for everyone.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a nice little gestures to diversity in there that don't really get explored in any meaningful way, but they are there.
Yeah. I found that shot of the fellow in the wheelchair to be it stuck out for all the right reasons, for sure. There's a funny little moment in it where the chairman of the board comes down. Yeah, the titular scene, the titular ending scene, where he's like, yeah, this is all fucking great. This is awesome. I'm loving all this. I look like a big old cowboy. And then, like, he just has this little barb where he's just like, now that equal pay thing, we can't be doing that. And I was just like, what the fuck? Why the fuck is that in there? Like,
I think
did you pick up on that? And were you as, like, startled by it? Was that meant to be some sort of joke, like, element of satire? Because obviously that's still something people deal with today. But, like, it just felt kind of really mean-spirited.
No, I kind of took it how I think they meant it, which is as, like, a joke. Yeah, I wasn't, like, startled by it.
Yes, I don't think that needed to be there, to be honest.
That's interesting.
Can
I tell you why I think it works?
Yeah, go for it.
Because it's this guy who's coming down, and it's kind of what I was talking about before, this kind of modern idea of, like, woke of, like, yeah, we love progress in the workplace, but they don't really. Mm-hmm. They love appearances of progress. But the actual giving of equal money to people, now let's all hold our horses.
Yeah.
I think that's the idea.
Yeah, it just felt strange that this is a fantasy world, right? Like, this movie doesn't exist in reality. Like, it's pretty detached in so many ways. Like, it has a heightened sense about it that I would say is akin to something like Legally Blonde. It's not, like, grounded in the natural world in the same way that something like Erin Brockovich is.
Yes.
So, yeah, I was like, so by the end of it, in a lot of ways, as foreshadowed by their literal fantasies, this is like three women who are now living their fantasy, something that they were able to do with absurd hijinks, as we've pointed out. Like, they've created an ideal workplace, and for whatever reason, they're more or less going to be running it. But why not just not have that line in there? Not even allude to equal pay, which is something that hasn't really even come up at all in the films. Like, why not just, like, let them have the win instead of sticking this barb in at the end? Because, like, I didn't find it funny. I found it very cruel. Like, even if it is a fantasy, like, let the fantasy exist. That would be my thing.
Okay. I don't know. It might have had, I think it might have had probably something to do with as well the context of, this is like right sort of at the tail end of the second wave where that's such a big talking point in the way that it's still a talking point now, but it's not in the way that it was then. I think it's probably reacting to the cultural zeitgeist. I didn't find it upsetting. If anything, I kind of felt it fit into that because it kind of adds into their like sort of cartoonish evil of these bosses.
Yeah. But I think the other thing is like it lends itself to be fight clubbed by like guys who are watching this, the Ronald Reagans of this world are going like, this is a fun, entertaining movie. And then like you get this funny punchline at the end where it's just like, yeah, they're never going to fucking get any money. That is funny. Like that is how I see it. And I see it's like particularly cruel. It's just like, it gives assholes a platform to continue to punch down.
Okay. I didn't really read it that way.
Yeah. But it's just like our favorite show, Mad Men, is like, don't write for other writers. You know what I mean? Like there's a line in that where it's just like, not everyone's going to get this funny satirical thing. Some people are going to take it literally for the wrong reasons. Like that's the whole thing about satire is like it alienates a lot of the audience. Like a lot of people will not be able to identify satire. Like it is in a lot of ways like a classist form of entertainment or a classist platform of style because not everyone is in tune to that. But yeah, look, it's also a shit movie. So I don't know. What do you want from me? Okay. But yeah, I always think if you do something like that, it's left open to be interpreted in a possibly negative way. But that's just how I feel.
Okay. There was something else.
And that was my centerpiece.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on like I feel like I've kind of ragged on it a little bit. I wanted to go back to the performances just a bit because obviously like I think Lily Tomlin is so funny. Mm-hmm. I kind of love her in everything. Even like I said with Bad Material, she's still hilarious. But there are also these moments like I was so tickled by the way that Jane Fonda says, I smoked a marijuana cigarette at a party once. Like,
yeah. That whole interaction at the bar and then later on when they're smoking weed it's just a great time.
And of there, so the movie really starts to kind of not go off the rails, but just go into this kind of sitcom bit. Like once they have their little weed party and they go into these little daydreams. I think Judy's. And also, I think Judith is pretty weak because, like, she's been there 2 weeks. She doesn't really, whatever. Hers is just hunting the boss. That doesn't matter. I feel like I actually found Doralee really strong because I think that so she has this because Doralee is fucking what is his? I've forgotten his name.
Franklin Hart.
Yeah, he's
Frank Hart. F Hart.
He's Doralee is Mr. Hart's secretary in the literal sense that she works outside of his office and takes his letters and takes his phone calls, that kind of thing. Who is being horribly sexually harassed by him the whole movie, the whole time she's been working there. And she's done this quite a graceful Dolly Parton style of laughing it off, brushing it off, keeping her composure.
Putting up with this shit.
Because as she says a bit later, like she is her husband's a musician, she needs the steady work. Well, that's implied. But anyway, her fantasy is just a role reversal of she's the boss and he's the secretary. And
she's doing the sexual assaulting.
And she's going to do, the harassment and the objectification. Yeah. And like, obviously that's, I feel like you could make a really annoying point of like, it's bad when women object. Like, yes, it is bad when women sexually harass men. Correct. We're not saying that. But I think that because sexual harassment of women is so normalized, when you do this really deliberate role reversal and you do not change much of the dialogue, it's things that he said that people in the 80s and probably even people now would be like, oh, that's just a compliment. It's not that bad, whatever. Yeah. When you have a woman saying it to a man instead, suddenly it's bizarre and it's weird and it's why are you treating your employee like this? So I actually felt that section was really strong. Yeah. And it's like, and it's, yeah.
I found it weird. Like I always find those scenes of sexual harassment played for laughs to be weird, but like the point was, it was contextual. It was a contextual point, and yeah, I think it exists correctly within the story because of how the world is set up beforehand. But yeah, like you say, it's direct role reversal, so I feel like it does balance out. I just feel sometimes I feel a bit funny when that stuff is played for laughs, but
yeah,
I can live with it.
I can understand that, but I think it's a thing that's too easily rolled into of like annoying people on the internet, like, oh, so it's okay when women do it to men. That's not the point. The point of the scene is not that she actually wants to objectify him. The point of the scene is she wants him to understand what he's doing to her. Mm-hmm. And by extension, the point of it in the movie is for people in the audience to then have an understanding of what's happening.
Yeah, it's also a literal fantasy as well. Yeah. So it's not like it actually happens within the world of the film.
Yeah. And not to mention that later in the film, like the first thing that he does when he realizes that they think that Lily Tomlin almost poisoned him on, like, the first thing that he does is try to blackmail.
I'm going to use this to fuck her.
Exactly. He tries to blackmail Dolly Parton into having sex with him. So it's like, I actually, like, the problem is again, is that it's not funny. Like,
yeah.
It's got this whole bit and she's in a whole like cowgirl get up and the problem is it's not funny. But I think like politically it's really interesting. And I think I found it really, I thought it was the most successful out of all the fantasy sequences.
Yeah, that all come to life in some way, shape, or form.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, enough of this dour intellectual shit.
Okay. Thanks.
Sorry. Time for Sexy Lamp. Sexy Lamp. This is a segment we do every week. We love it. You love it. Everyone loves it. If you can replace any character in your film with a sexy lamp and it'll make no difference to the plot, themes, or story, you are a hack. Cara, who's your sexy lamp for 9 to 5?
The old Lush.
What?
The alcoholic. I don't know.
It's very funny. I love the whole like, atta girl.
Yeah, that's what I mean. This movie does have moments where I'm like, yeah, that's what.
I'm a doctor. Why am I talking to you? Piss off. Yeah, that's great.
Okay,
so you don't really have a sexy lamp, do you?
No, not really.
My sexy lamp is the boss's wife.
Oh, yeah.
Mrs. Hart.
Yeah.
I think she's just a very traditional sexy lamp.
Yeah.
In the sense, it's like ditzy, like.
I think I did briefly think of her and then I forgot. Because I forgot he was kind of in the movie.
Yeah, so...
Missy.
Yeah.
Is that her name?
Missy pardon me. Missy Hart. So blissfully unaware of her shitbag husband's behaviour in any way, shape or form. Yeah, just like what you would imagine a sexy lamp. This is like textbook.
I guess, yeah, except for the fact that she's not very sexualized. Because she's not considered an object of desire by her husband or by the film. So, but yeah, like plot-wise, totally.
Yeah. It's very much, if we call back upon our own catalogue of films, sort of in the same way that Candice Bergen's character in Miss Congeniality is sort of just like boxed out. It's like, you're an old lady.
Yeah.
You're fucking dumb. We don't like you. Like, it's kind of in that realm.
A little, I think, yeah, maybe in terms of like sort of cringe and has it aged well. I remember I was watching a video that had an interview in it with Lily Tomlin and they were talking about how they were filming scenes of Dolly Parton being ostracized in the movie because people assume based on how she dresses, and also it turns out that the boss has just been spreading rumors that they're having an affair, which is not true. Mm-hmm. And that kind of results in her being ostracized by other women in the workplace, which is obviously not good. And like about how her assistant got really upset because she like that's how Dolly Parton was kind of treated in real life as a teenager. Mm-hmm. And some of that is still pretty resonant. I think the workplace politics stuff is also like kind of interesting.
I think that also happened to Jane Fonda in real life. She alludes to that in interview that you sent through to me, that she was fired from a job where she was a secretary because she wouldn't sleep with the boss.
Yeah. I picked up on that. Like, that's horrible.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is what I mean when I say, like, this movie, like, it's not good, but it's kind of still, like, so relevant. Like, I mean, maybe not stuff sort of quite as overt as that, but we're still living in an era of Me Too. We're still living in an era of sexual harassment in the workplace. Like, this stuff still happens, and it's still not, I mean, fucking, this is what I was thinking about. The Women's World Cup final, the president, when he just kissed her, and then he's like, this is woke politics. This is bullshit. This is like, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not resigning. And a room full of men stand up and applaud him.
Yeah.
Like, it's disgusting. And that was on camera in front of the whole world. Like, what happens behind closed doors? So yeah, despite the fact it's not a very good movie, it's still kind of hugely relevant.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And it's, yeah, I this is definitely minor in comparison. And I'll use your, I guess, bullshit detector, whether we leave it in or not. But it's, I feel like the way some of the other women characters in sort of the first act react to Dolly Parton's character and the assumed affair that she's having is also a reaction that victims of oppression, like huge sexual oppression, can have. It's just like, well, she's doing this. And it's just like, it's a projection of insecurity that's been enforced by an environment that's no fault of their own. It's, I guess, derogatory. People would refer to it as like the pecking order sort of thing.
Absolutely. I don't disagree with that at all. I think there's a lot of truth in that, of like, well, she's using her sexuality to get ahead and I don't do that, or I can't do that. And like but like definitely under like, you know, so if you can consider this workplace as like a little microcosm of patriarchy basically, and, you know, the boss employee dynamic, like it enforces this discord between people, because if they're not together, then they can't be against me, right?
Yeah.
And even that, like, that's a really interesting point actually, because, you know, they also have the rules about not talking about your salary. People can't know what we're all earning, and talking about it might lead to uniting against the top. So I totally agree.
Yeah. Systemic oppression finding its way through everywhere. And obviously, like, I can't speak to experiencing that personally. So it's just an observation. I pass no judgment on anyone in that position, obviously. So it's not my story to tell, just something that I picked up on. So anyway.
No, and I don't like to, I mean, I think that's an interesting kind of turnaround, is like the relationship between Doralee and Judy, because Judy's coming from a relationship where her husband left her for his secretary, had an affair. Like, it's not.
Which would have been a much more interesting conflict to deal with over an hour and a half, rather than like, let's see if we can move a fucking body around from the hospital to the back of a car.
Yeah, but I just mean in terms of their relationship, like, I couldn't fault someone in Judy's position being resentful of someone in Doralee's position. Like, there's a misunderstanding based on, not to mention this guy's fucking lying. He's out there telling people that this is happening. Like, I just think it's kind of nice for me that they managed to just, I mean, it's kind of a little bit unbelievable that Doralee's just so forgiving that she just doesn't really care. They just become friends straight away.
Well, that's why it's just great casting, isn't it?
Well, you would kind of believe
they smoke a doobie, it's all good.
You would kind of believe it of Dolly Parton, and they do have a good enough chemistry for it to be believable. But like, yeah, that they kind of managed to come together over this shared sense of injustice, I think is just a nice, you know, women's solidarity is very important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Shall we push into grading criteria?
Yes.
Okay, grading criteria. We grade every film that we review on this podcast with 3 rules, questions, things. Anyway, those annoying voices. Okay. Does it Fight Club? Does it Bechdel? And does she make it? First, does it Fight Club? Quick recap. If a film has a reverse effect of what the filmmakers intended, case in point, something like Fight Club, basic-ass movie that should have been just a warning about how mental health issues can affect people, made boys punch each other in the face forever. Cara, does this film Fight Club?
I wrote down no, but I sort of had a realization that I think that actually parts of this movie are pretty sexist.
Do go on.
Well, the Xerox machine bit, like at the end, he gets out. Like he gets out of his prison and he just goes to the office, and then it's another fucking, what do you call it? A deus ex machina that the CEO comes down and he actually likes all the changes the women have done. Mm-hmm. And then fucking Frank or whatever takes credit for it. And then he gets sent to Brazil, and Lily Tomlin apparently gets promoted in the after credits.
The title card.
In the title.
I think he dies in the title card stuff though.
No, he goes missing. He
Okay,
gets kidnapped by an Amazonian tribe,
yeah.
which is another pretty cringe kind of thing to happen there.
Yeah. Racism played for laughs? Never.
But I mean, at the end of the day, I guess this kind of fits into does she roar? Like do they make it? Like they make it, but they kind of make it by accident. Like they're still not really. I mean, Lily Tomlin gets.
They did put in the work though.
They do put in the work, and Lily Tomlin gets promoted in an end title. So I guess, but it's weird to me that in this movie that has all these things about, it's about feminism and it's about labor rights. But still, they can't really do it. Like, they think they've poisoned a guy and they accidentally steal the wrong body from a hospital for hijinks. And then they kidnap him and they manage to keep him kidnapped. And then his wife comes home early and just lets him out. And then the boss is like, these are great. I'm going to promote you. And then that's just kind of the end of, like, it's a real fizzle of an ending.
The whole thing fizzles.
So I don't think of Fight Club.
You fucked up the criteria.
Sorry. I don't think of Fight Clubs. I don't think there's enough in there for it to Fight Club. So I don't think of Fight Clubs.
Yeah, fair enough. I think it might. I think the Reagan comment. We should read the Reagan comment. Yeah. Would you like to read it out?
Yeah, but can you bring it up?
I sure frickety fucking can.
So Ronald Reagan, by the way, enemy of the pod.
Yeah.
And may you rot in hell.
Hell doesn't exist.
But if it does, you're there.
Reception.
Yeah. There it is. I've got it. Mm-hmm. So Ronald Reagan wrote in his presidential diary that him and Nancy Reagan. By the way, Ronald Reagan was an actor. Mm-hmm. Just for those of you who don't know, he
also president of the United States.
Twice.
Twice?
Yeah, he got elected twice.
Oh, wow.
He's an 8 years guy.
Got elected twice. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah.
Like, who the fuck cares? Yeah, keep going. Fuck this guy.
Anyway, sorry. Ronald Reagan and Nancy watched the film on Valentine's Day, 1981. Very cute Valentine's Day date at the White House.
Even evil people can go on dates.
And in his presidential diary wrote, quote, "Funny, but one scene made me mad. A truly funny scene if the three gals had played getting drunk, but no, they had to get stoned on pot. It was an endorsement of pot smoking for any young person who sees the picture."
Funny. Incredibly funny. Someone so attached. But yeah, that's
a marijuana cigarette.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, those are the sort of takes that.
But that's not Fight Clubbing to me. That's just an idiot.
Yeah, he very much so. But yeah. I mean, it's just that attitude for me transcends into other stuff where it's just like stressing over, these women are all stupid because they took the wrong body to and all this sort of stuff. Like they're panicking in a situation. It's the same sort of criticism of people criticizing the lead characters in Thelma and Louise for being irrational or being stressed out in a crisis situation when they're just kind of reacting how, I don't know, people act when they are erratic. So it takes away from the point, like, it's a stressful environment. It's pretty much what I was saying. Is like these three people are victims of systemic oppression. And when you're a victim of systemic oppression, you act erratically in moments of crisis. It would have been great if I prepared a quote, but I've got the feeling like, well, look, it does say here, like a lot of the film criticism. So like Roger Ebert, for example, gave it 3 stars out of 4, pleasantly entertaining, liked it despite its uneven qualities and a plot that was too almost preposterous for its material. I was like, yeah, it is a preposterous plot, but like if your criticism exists entirely over the plot, you've missed the point of this film. And that's why, I mean, it's fairly Fight Clubby.
Yeah.
It's
but
like-
I just don't think it's enough. Like for me to Fight Club, it's got to like really have kind of that actual movement behind it. Because there are people who really idolize Fight Club and The Godfather and The Sopranos and Mad Men in these ways that are really destructive. I don't think there's anybody watching this going, you know, who had the right idea in this movie? The Boss. Like,
I reckon there is,
there probably is.
I reckon there really is. Like, they're the same people who'd be like, yeah, he's trying to fuck Dolly Parton.
Maybe.
Don Draper's sick, man. He fucks all these chicks.
Yeah.
Like, I should have got a quote. I can't give it a Fight Club because I didn't get a quote.
I don't think there would be much of that.
Okay.
But also I think, to be quite honest with you, the fact that it's a comedy with 3 women as the main characters, like even as much as Jane Fonda has tried to make it as broad appeal as possible because she wants to get her message out to as broad an audience as possible, I'd still say the main audience is going to be women.
Yeah.
So that kind of inhibits it as well.
Fair enough.
So for me, it doesn't Fight Club.
All right. Fine. It doesn't Fight Club. 2 points. You win this round, 9-5. Does it Bechdel? I couldn't find a scene. I couldn't think of a scene where it Bechdels.
I think it does. And
would you like to define the Bechdel test as per the Feminist Film Guide?
Okay. The film has to have at least 2 women in it. Tick.
Named women, which is what we apply to that.
2 named women, well,
Yeah.
tick, who talk to each other about something besides a man. I think it does.
Give me one scene.
I think
Name a woman.
I think the scenes where Lily Tomlin trains Jane Fonda, I think pass. I think a lot of the scenes of them like planning, like I know they're sort of tangentially talking about the fact that they've kidnapped a man, but they're not really talking about him. They're talking about like their scheme. The stuff where they're stealing the body. I think that counts for me. But I can it's still yeah. I can understand if you don't agree, but
it Bechdels but?
No, it Bechdels.
Okay.
You're
fine.
just wrong.
Okay, fine. Well, there you go. Well, by sheer definition, this movie is already passed. It's got 4 out of 4 so far. But do they make it? That's the real question.
Well, they make it in the titles, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Because Dolly Parton becomes Dolly Parton. Sorry, Dora Lee becomes Dolly Parton.
Successful country music singer.
Lily Tomlin gets promoted, and I think Judy gets married or something.
Yeah, she marries the Xerox guy.
Nice.
Yeah, the cycle starts again.
And then she never... I think they do. Actually, I would say do they make it is kind of the most contentious for me because of...
the glass ceiling?
No, more just like how I don't like the ending. The ending just kind of fizzles out. Like...
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, like this was the other thing. There's a lack of what you're talking about of like setup and payoff. There's a lack of setup and payoff. Like there's a setup of him embezzling, and there's actually nice little seeds of the fact that he's stealing goods basically, and he's got an empty warehouse that should have company goods and it doesn't. And there's this kind of little moments of build up of like, if anyone ever talks to you about this warehouse, you bring it straight to me and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah. And the same with the chair breaking. And then like, I've never met the chairman of the board.
But then in the end, he just gets out, manages to put all the stock back in the warehouse. And then it's only by yet another wacky happenstance.
Hand of God. Yeah.
A wacky Deus Ex Machina of what's his name? The KFC colonel coming
Chairman
down.
Chairman of the board, yeah.
The KFC colonel coming down and giving him a job in Brazil for some reason is the only reason that Lily Tomlin does. This is what was it? The point of it was that he wasn't going to be able to blackmail Lily Tomlin into going to and Dolly Parton into having sex with him so that Lily Tomlin, like that's all gone.
Yeah.
This is what I mean. The ending fizzles. So
it sucks, man. It's bad writing.
Yeah.
It's fucking shit writing.
So then they stick in these, and so then whatever. So then he's gone and they're kind of left running it, which is nice. And then But I'm going to say that they do make it.
But at what cost?
They make it, but by no real kind of action of their own. At the end of the day, they make it and it's incidental.
Yeah. So this movie gets full marks. Despite our best efforts. Okay, Cara. Is 9 to 5 more helpful or harmful?
I think it's helpful.
This is a flawless movie. This flaming dumpster of a film is flawless in terms of our own criteria. What have we done to ourselves?
I just think for me, I found the work stuff and the women in work stuff so relatable and so relevant, even 40 years later, that the fact that the actual plot stuff is not very good doesn't diminish the overall themes. Yeah. So I think it's helpful.
Yes. Well, I do too, I suppose. I mean, it's timeless in that sense. Like the issues are still being had and it's still relevant. It's a fucking doozy though. It's a real weird movie.
It is weird. I don't not recommend it though, because I think it's got some good performances in it. Yeah.
It's worth it for the camaraderie between the three leads alone, I think.
But you could probably turn it off at about 45 minutes.
Yeah. If you make it past the fantasies, you're doing okay. Mm-hmm. All right, well, that just about does it for another episode of A Bechdel Dysfunction, a podcast that dissects feminist films directed by men and discusses whether they are helpful or harmful. Join us again next time for another installment.